I was the last to know that her pain was always because of me. For years, I saw her stretch herself thin to keep the peace. There was always a smile on her face and a word of encouragement as I wrestled with my own insecurities. The smell of incense in the church mingled with the aroma of the coffee she brewed for the gatherings. She was the first to arrive and the last to leave, constantly serving, always invisible. No one noticed, but I did. What I didn't see was what she was hiding. Her routine was a delicate dance. When the meeting started, she positioned herself there in the corner, paying attention to everything but never putting herself in the spotlight. She's so strong, I thought, not knowing that her strength was a burden. With every word of praise I received, she shrank a bit more. It was as if she was always ready to absorb the world's pain but never shared hers. It was one rainy afternoon, while everyone crowded at the church entrance, that I noticed something different. The pastor's tone of voice was more intense, and when he turned to me, he mentioned a past mistake. "We're all here to learn," he said, but I felt the weight of the criticism. Deep down, I knew he wasn't speaking for me. And at that fraction of a second, I didn't realize she was beside me, hearing every word. But nothing prepared me for what happened next. I was in the prayer room, surrounded by familiar faces. When she entered, there was something wrong in her eyes, a shadow I had never seen. "You don't need to worry," she said. But there was a tremor in her voice that made me question. The silence in that sacred space seemed to swallow the words that needed to be said. And it was at that moment that the truth began to reveal itself between the lines. The pastor had addressed me, but the words were an echo of her pain. I didn't know, but she carried a weight I never imagined. When she left from the room, I followed her, but the door closed between us like an abyss. Perhaps they never knew that true courage was within her. While I sought validation, she sacrificed in silence. The truth was not just a mistake I made, it was the pain she kept, a legacy of unacknowledged love. She was always the rock, but erosion was consuming her. At that moment, something inside me woke up. I realized that her faith was what held everything together, while mine was just a shadow of her light. If only I had seen, if only I had asked. But life is made of unasked questions and hidden truths. I learned that silence can be more than just unspoken words. It can be a suffocated scream echoing in the soul. Her pain intertwined with mine, and I never knew. I always believed that love was something easy, something that was spoken. But true surrender is silent, it is sacrificial. God knows what is in each person's heart, and I finally understood that her love did not need recognition. She hurt herself to protect me. But the greatest gift she could give me was the truth. I learned that we do not need to be seen to be loved. Sometimes, the worst pain is not the lie. It's realizing that the truth was already there, right before my eyes, while I remained blind to her pain. Have you ever felt that way? Have you ever had someone who hurt themselves for you and you didn't realize it? It's worth reflecting on that. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Time passed, and the image of her walking away, with the door closing between us, was etched into me like an open wound. Each succeeding Sunday felt like an echo of the pain I couldn't understand. I saw her, always there, but now her presence was like a constant reminder of what I had lost. The church, which was once a refuge, became a place of discomfort. The music that once uplifted me now sounded like a sad song, and the smell of the incense, which once brought peace, now only awakened memories of an unrecognized love. It was in moments of solitude that the deepest truths emerged. I began to look at the people around me and wondered how many of them were living their own silent pains. Those expressions of joy were actually masks hiding heavy burdens. I was not the only one carrying a story of disconnection. The difference is that I was finally beginning to see. In one of those reflections, a new thought rose. What if I could be the voice she never had? What if I could honor her pain instead of just lamenting? The desire to reverse the situation grew in me like a flame, and the idea of speaking about the truth she held became an irresistible urge. But how to do this without causing even more harm? The answer did not come immediately. The fear of exposing her weaknesses and my own lack of perception paralyzed me. However, memories of her serving, smiling, always in the background, began to transform into a call. It was as if her silent strength was urging me to act. I can't let this continue, I thought. She deserves to be seen, so I decided I should speak with the pastor. I went to him, my mind teeming with the words I wanted to say. "I want to understand your vision of the church," I began, hesitant. I think there are things we need to discuss about how we treat our brothers and sisters. He looked at me with that authoritative expression, but something in his eyes seemed hesitant. He was not prepared for what was to come next. I'm not the only one who feels that something is wrong. There are people who get hurt in silence, people like her, whom you never noticed, and I didn't notice either. Her strength was a burden, and I don't want this story to repeat itself. The words came out of me like an outpouring that I didn't know I needed to make. The silence that followed seemed dense, as if the air had been compressed. And, at that moment, I saw a shadow pass over the pastor's face. It was as if he had remembered something he had set aside. What followed was a conversation that changed the course of everything. He began to look at the community in a new way, and I realized that the change I desired was not just about my story or hers, but about everyone who felt invisible. The church, a sacred space, could be a place where pain is acknowledged and not ignored. And, by speaking, I was not only honoring her memory, but also allowing myself to feel the pain I had ignored for so long. In the following months, I began to get more involved. I organized small support groups where people could share their experiences without fear of judgment. It was in this space that I saw other stories emerge. Eyes that were once empty began to shine with the light of truth. And, among these voices, hers still echoed. I didn't know if she knew what was happening, but at each meeting, with each story told, I felt that I was, in some way, bringing her back to life. However, not everything was easy. I faced resistance. Some people felt threatened by the idea that pain could be shared and not just endured. The fear of exposing vulnerabilities was palpable, but there was something greater at stake. The need to break the cycle of silence and shame was stronger than any resistance I might encounter. One day, at the end of a meeting, a woman approached me. Her eyes were brimming with tears, and she said, "You don't know how much this has helped me." I thought I was alone. At that moment, I realized the power of a space safe. The love that once seemed invisible now manifested itself in every tear, in every shy smile of someone who finally felt seen. And her pain became part of a much larger narrative, a story of collective healing. Life went on, and her legacy intertwined with my quest for truth and justice. Every step I took towards listening to and validating the stories of others was a step towards my own healing. The pain that was once a burden now transformed into strength, and by sharing her story, I not only honored her memory but also made space for others to find their own truths. It was as if the light she had left on my path now illuminated the way for many others. The community began to transform, but the struggle was far from over. One afternoon, while organizing yet another meeting, I received an unexpected message. It was from the woman who had approached me. She wanted to speak in person. My heart raced. What could this new voice bring? When we met, I realized she carried a pain that I recognized. Her story was marked by rejection and loneliness, just like mine and hers. As we talked, tears streamed down her face, and with every word, I felt the connection deepen. "I've always felt invisible," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "And when you talked about your friend, about what she did for you, I realized I wasn't alone. But what if I don't have the courage to be seen?" Her question resonated with me. How many times had I felt that same fear? The silence that had dominated our lives was about to be broken, but not without cost. "Sometimes courage is just a step, a word that dares to come out," I responded. "And what if we could be that voice for others? If by speaking, we could create an echo of love and acceptance?" The idea began to take form, a project where stories of pain would become tales of overcoming, where everyone could be heard and validated. From that conversation, we decided to create a sharing space. We called it Silenced Voices. The proposal was simple: a monthly meeting where people could come, tell their stories, listen to others, and together, build a path to healing. The first meeting was marked by nervousness but also hope. On the day, the room was packed, anxious eyes, pounding hearts. I looked around and saw familiar faces but also strangers, all there seeking a piece of understanding. The first to speak was an elderly woman, with trembling hands. Her voice faltered at first but soon found firmness as she shared the pain of losing a child. Each word of hers was an invitation for others to open up as well, and thus, one by one, the stories began to flow. Tears and laughter intertwined in the air. Each story brought out a new layer of pain but also a new possibility for healing. I realized how pain, when shared, became lighter, and at each meeting, Her presence made itself felt like a whisper of encouragement. However, not everyone was ready for this transformation. Some church members strongly opposed the idea. This is not what the church represents. They said, "We are here to preach faith, not to expose weaknesses." The shock of religious conservatism hit me like a wave, but her voice still echoed within me, and I knew I couldn't give up. "We are here to welcome, not to judge," I defended. Faith is not just about what is seen, but also about what is hidden. True love does not fear vulnerability. Although I felt like I was fighting against a raging sea, I realized that there was a growing number of people willing to listen and discuss the importance of giving voice to those who suffer in silence. What followed was a battle for hearts and minds. Some people decided to step away, but others joined us, creating a movement within the church itself. We saw resistance turn into acceptance, and what started as a seed of change began to blossom. The community was starting to understand that pain was not a sign of weakness, but rather an aspect of the human experience that deserves to be recognized. In one of these meetings, a young man stood up to speak. He was new to the town and the church. His voice trembled, but the sincerity in his words was palpable. "I thought I was alone," he said, with tears in his eyes. "But now, hearing you all, I realize that I am not the only one carrying this pain. I just wanted to be seen, and now I know I am." The impact of his words was profound. He reminded us that behind every smile, there can be an invisible struggle. Over time, the idea of silenced voices not only consolidated but expanded. We began to receive people from other communities, and the message that pain should be shared and not hidden began to spread. But even amid these advances, I struggled with the feeling that there was more to be done. With every victory, her image would arise in my mind, and I wondered if she would be proud of me. I wanted to do justice to her sacrifice, to the strength she always had. Even with each new meeting, I felt her presence stronger, as if she were there, encouraging me to move forward. It was a silent drive that reminded me of everything she had done, how she always sought to help others, even when her own pain begged for attention. The idea that I was somehow continuing her legacy filled me with a new and profound responsibility. I could not let her story fade away in the collective memory of the church. The meetings began to become a space of welcome and transformation. The walls of the room where we met seemed to absorb every tear shed, every shared laugh. It was there that I saw people opening up, revealing their struggles and their victories, and in the midst of all this, her story continued to be a beacon, guiding our conversations and reminding us of the importance of being seen. One night, as we were organizing a special event to celebrate the stories that had emerged, an unexpected idea arose. What if we could take these voices beyond the church walls? What if we could share these experiences with the broader community? The desire to expand the reach of our project grew within me, like a flame that could not be ignored. What started as a small support group now had the chance to become a movement. I started thinking about how we could create an open event where not just church members, but anyone could come and share their story. The idea of a gathering of voices began to take shape. I imagined a space where pain and healing could intertwine in a collective embrace, where vulnerability was celebrated instead of hidden. But, as always, doubt and fear began to whisper. What if people weren't interested? What if resistance were greater than acceptance? However, deep in my heart, something told me it was the right time. Her story taught me to believe in the power of truth and the courage to open spaces for dialogue. I needed to take this step. With the help of the most engaged members of our group, we began to plan the event. The idea was simple: create a safe space where people could tell their stories, listen to others, and together build an environment of empathy and support. We started promoting the event on social media, with posters, and during church meetings. The nervousness grew with each passing day, but so did the anticipation. I had no idea what to expect, but I felt that something grand was about to happen. On the day of the event, the room was full. Curious looks, nervous smiles, and pounding hearts filled the air. As I watched people settle in, a wave of emotion hit me. It was as if each one of them brought with them a unique and valuable story, a piece of pain, and a spark of hope. I was not alone. We were all there in search of understanding and connection. When the event started, I stood up to open the conversation. Hearing my own voice, I realized that the words that once seemed heavy now flowed with sincerity. We are here to listen and be heard. Each of us carries a story, and each story is a fundamental part of who we are. As I spoke, A feeling of belonging began to spread among us. It was as if the barriers that separated us were being dissolved by the courage to share. The first stories began to emerge, and the room filled with tears and laughter. A woman started talking about the pain of losing a loved one, and I saw many eyes fill with empathy. A young man shared his struggle with anxiety, and the room went silent, absorbing every word. I felt that we were all connected by an invisible thread, a web of human experiences that united us. But not everything was easy. Some voices still rose against the idea of exposing vulnerabilities. During one of the talks, a man interrupted, saying that the church should be a place of strength, not weakness. My heart raced in my chest. How do I respond to this? But as I looked around and saw the encouraged faces of those present, I realized that we had come a long way. True strength lies in acknowledging our weaknesses, I said, trying to remain calm. We don't have to carry our burdens alone. Healing happens when we share our stories. The tension in the air seemed palpable, but the desire for change was stronger. The resistance that once terrified me now seemed like an opportunity for dialogue. The event continued, and with each new story told, I saw more people opening up. That safe space was starting to flourish. By the end of the night, what used to be a sea of doubts and insecurities had transformed into an ocean of possibilities. As the stories unfolded, I realized the transformation that was happening not just within me, but in each person there. The tears that once signaled pain were now becoming testimonies of overcoming. A man who had lost his wife spoke about the moments when he felt most lost, and the empathy in the room was palpable. His words resonated, and I saw others nodding, as if recognizing their own struggles in each sentence. It was as if, in this space, pain became a bond of unity. Each account seemed like an invitation for others to dare to share their own truths. A young woman who had battled depression stood up timidly, and her voice, though fragile, carried a contagious strength. I always thought I was alone, she said, but hearing you all makes me realize I'm not the only one carrying this weight. What was once a solitary burden was now starting to dissipate, shared among those who were willing to listen and be heard. But, as the night progressed, a feeling of restlessness began to settle within me. Could it be that this change I so desired was truly lasting? There were resistances I hadn't yet faced, and the fear that all of this could crumble at any moment was a constant shadow in my heart. What if this was just a fleeting illusion? The echo of doubt followed me, but the determination to keep going spoke louder when the event came to an end. The energy in the room was palpable. People began to stand up, and I saw smiles where there was once sadness. There was a new sparkle in many eyes, as if the truth had finally found its way to the surface. But, as I observed this rebirth, a thought struck me: how to ensure that this change wasn't just a fleeting moment, but rather a new beginning. I went to the group that had formed around the woman who had shared her story about loss. They were embraced, and the connection among them was evident. We should keep meeting, I suggested, driven by the need to keep this flame alive. If we create a recurring space, we can strengthen this support network. The idea was enthusiastically received, and soon we began to discuss the possibility of making the Gathering of Voices a monthly event. In the following days, conversations about the event continued to echo in my mind. The desire to expand the idea grew, and I began to think about how we could take this experience beyond the church walls. What if we could do something bigger, I thought. A community event that welcomed even more voices. The concept of a storytelling fair took shape. A celebration where people could share their experiences and also find resources and support. The idea of bringing more people, of allowing their voices to be heard, was a way to honor her memory and all the other stories that were waiting to be told. I began to plan to get in touch with other communities and organizations that could join us. The fear of the unknown was still present, but the certainty that this was an opportunity for change kept me from giving up. Meanwhile, the church began to adapt to this new reality. Some voices still opposed what we were doing, but others began to join the cause. If the church is not a place to welcome human pain, where else could we find this space? Was the question that echoed in many hearts, and so, the resistance began to dissolve, giving way to a new way of thinking. With each new meeting, silence voices became stronger. The event that initially was an intimate space began to attract people from different spheres. Each month, new stories emerged, and I realized that the pain that was once suffocating was now turning into a chant of hope. The voices that once felt invisible now rose, and I saw the strength of a community forming, united by vulnerability and courage to expose themselves. One night, after a particularly emotional meeting, a woman approached me. Her gaze was full of gratitude. "You don't know how this has changed my life," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "I thought I would never be seen. But now, I feel like I am finally part of something bigger." Her words touched my heart in a way that I couldn't describe. It was as if the mission that had started as a personal reflection was now expanding to touch lives in ways I could never have imagined. With time, the gathering of voices became a broader movement, and the idea of a story fair finally materialized. The day of the event arrived, and the space was filled with people. It was a mosaic of experiences, with booths where people could share their stories and hear those of others. The day of the event arrived, and the space was filled with people. It was a mosaic of experiences, with booths where people could share their stories and hear those of others. The air was charged with expectation and hope. As if everyone there was about to discover something profound about themselves and about others, I looked around and saw familiar and unfamiliar faces, all united by the same desire to be seen and heard. As the activities began, a sense of euphoria mixed with nervousness overcame me. The soft music in the background seemed to create a welcoming environment, like a hug that enveloped everyone. Every corner of the space was decorated with photos and inspirational phrases, reminding everyone about the importance of vulnerability and courage. It was a reminder that, although stories of pain were difficult to share, they were also sources of strength and connection. A woman approached me, her eyes shining with emotion. "I never thought I could be here, sharing my story with so many people," she said, her voice trembling. "I always believed no one cared." Her story resonated with me, and I realized that, at that moment, she was freeing herself from a burden she had carried for years. If I had ever felt the pain of invisibility, now I could clearly see how this space was becoming a sanctuary for many. Each booth was an invitation to discovery. Various voices began to echo throughout the environment, each one more powerful than the last. A young artist spoke about how art helped her deal with depression, revealing that her paintings were a way to express the emotions she couldn't verbalize. "When I paint, I feel like I'm freeing myself," she said, and the room applauded, recognizing the beauty of her struggle and the strength of her expression. As I walked from booth to booth, I realized that the stories were like threads intertwining, forming a rich and complex tapestry. A man shared his experience of overcoming the loss of a loved one, and the tears in the listeners' eyes showed that each word resonated in their own lives. I saw people looking at each other, recognizing each other's pain, and it filled me with renewed hope. The connection was there, pulsating in the air, but not everything was light. In a corner, a group of people was having a heated discussion. One man insisted that the church should focus only on faith sermons and not get involved in emotional issues. The tension was palpable, and I knew that resistance still existed, even amid the transformation we were promoting. But, at the same time, I realized that this confrontation was an opportunity to bring to light the voices that had so far been silenced. I approached the group, feeling my heart race. "We need to understand that faith is not just about what is visible," I said, trying to stay calm. "True love includes pain and vulnerability. We can't ignore the human experience in the name of an idealized image of faith." The words came out firmer than I expected, and I saw the expressions around me change. Some people nodded, while others still seemed reluctant. But there was a movement towards understanding. The conversation continued, and I realized that, even amid resistance, there was a growing desire for dialogue. What started as a clash was turning into a meaningful conversation about how the community could unite, rather than divide. It was a small step, but a step in the right direction. As the day progressed, a constant flow of stories and emotions filled the space, with each new account. The environment became more welcoming and secure. People began to open up, sharing not only their pains but also their dreams and hopes. An elderly man talked about how loneliness had accompanied him throughout his life, but how he found new friends in that space. "It's never too late to be seen," he said, and the room erupted in applause. The event was becoming a testament to the power of empathy. I saw how everyone's stories were not just individual but part of a greater whole. The experiences of pain and overcoming were intertwining, showing that vulnerability was not a sign of weakness, but rather a bridge that connected everyone there at the end of the day. As people began to disperse, a feeling of accomplishment washed over me. I knew that the journey was just beginning, but what had been created there was something precious. The voices that were once silenced now had space to echo, and I felt that we were just scratching the surface of what could be. While we were tidying up the place to close, a young woman approached me with a shy smile on her face. "Thank you for creating this space. I never thought I could talk about what I was going through. Now, I feel like I'm not alone." Her words touched my heart, and those words reverberated within me like an echo of everything I had wished to achieve. It was as if every tear shed during those months of struggle and pain was finally transforming into something beautiful and meaningful. "I am grateful for you having the courage to create this space," she continued, and I realized that, at that moment, something had changed within me. I was not just the voice of someone who felt invisible. I was becoming part of a collective that was coming together in search of healing and understanding. While looking around, I saw faces that were once strangers now illuminated by a shine of hope. The group that initially gathered to discuss their pains was now becoming a community. The walls that once seemed cold and oppressive were now imbued with human warmth. It was as if each shared story had left an indelible mark, transforming that space into a sanctuary of welcome. Gradually, I began to realize that the Silenced Voices project was not just about hearing and being heard. It was a journey of self-discovery. Each of us was, in some way, freeing ourselves from the chains of pain we had carried. A woman who had shared her struggle with anxiety at the last meeting was now becoming one of the facilitators. She brought a unique perspective, a testimony that, although the pain was real, overcoming it was also possible. "We are here to support each other," she said, and her words echoed like a mantra among all of us. But as the community grew, so did the need to find ways to sustain this space. The idea of expanding the Voices meeting into something more formal began to arise. The desire to create an organization that could provide continuous support and resources for those who struggled in silence became a flame that could not be ignored. I knew we needed a structure, a foundation, so that the voices emerging there would not be just momentary echoes, but part of a lasting movement. I called a meeting with the most engaged members of the group. The gleam in their eyes told me that we were all on the same wavelength. What if we could create a space where not only stories were shared, but do we also bring in professionals willing to help us? I suggested. My voice trembling with emotion. "We can offer therapies, workshops, and even mental health awareness events. We need to give these voices the opportunity to be heard in a meaningful way." The faces around me reflected a mixture of enthusiasm and apprehension. "That would be amazing, but how would we make that happen?" asked a young man who had become one of the pillars of the group. The question was pertinent, and a contemplative silence settled in. But I knew this was just a stage of the process. "Let's start with what we have," I replied, "and gradually, we'll find our way." Thus, we began to draft a plan, create a website, seek partnerships with local therapists, organize events that not only celebrated the stories but also provided tools and resources for personal transformation. The idea of a story festival gained traction, where the community's voices could be amplified in a safe and welcoming environment. With each new idea, the enthusiasm grew, and I saw the passion burning in everyone's eyes. In the weeks that followed, the work intensified. Each meeting became an opportunity to plan, structure, and dream. What was once a small support group was now transforming into a solidarity network spreading throughout the city. We began gathering video testimonials, capturing the essence of the stories that had been shared. These videos would serve as a way to give visibility to those who had felt invisible for so long. But even amid all this excitement, the shadow of doubt still lingered over me. What if it all fell apart? Was I really prepared to lead such a large movement? One night, while reviewing the recordings, an unexpected message arrived on my phone. It was from an old friend, someone who had witnessed my journey from the beginning. "I'm proud of you," the message said. "You are making a difference." Those simple words were like a balm for my soul. I remembered that I was not alone on this journey. Over time, I had built a support network that extended beyond the church and the group. Friends, family, and even strangers had become part of this story, and so, with a lighter heart, I resumed my search for support and resources. The festival date was approaching, and the anxiety was growing. Every detail was important, from choosing the venue to planning the activities. The day would soon arrive, and I knew it was an opportunity to transform not just individual lives but the entire community. The idea of creating a space where pain could be shared and healing could flourish was palpable. The idea of creating a space where pain could be shared and healing could flourish was palpable. I could already see people gathering, each bringing with them their stories, their struggles, and their hopes. And, amid it all, her image still persisted, a constant reminder of the legacy I was trying to honor. The desire for her strength and love to reach others was a silent but powerful motivation. As the festival day approached, the anxiety and excitement intertwined in my chest. I remembered the conversations with my friend, the pain she carried, and how, in every meeting, the truth she had kept became a light for others. I did not want her story to get lost in the shadows of oblivion. I wanted her courage to be remembered, celebrated, and to inspire others to open up. Each day, I felt more connected to this purpose. Finally, the day of the festival arrived. The sun shone brightly, and the gentle breeze seemed to carry with it a promise of renewal. Upon arriving at the location, I saw the decorated tables, the hanging lights, and the eager faces. The energy in the air was electrifying. I looked around and realized that even amid the nerves, there was a sense of community. Each person there was present for a reason, the search for belonging and the need to be heard. As the first participants arrived, I felt a mix of gratitude and nervousness. I knew that many stories were about to be shared, and this could be both a blessing and a heavy responsibility. Be the voice she never had, I reminded myself, as I looked at the faces gathering in search of connection. Each one was a fragment of a much larger mosaic, and I was about to be a bridge between them. The opening of the festival was marked by a performance that set the stage for the stories to come. A group of local musicians began to play, creating an atmosphere of warmth. The melodies were soothing, like an invitation for people to feel at ease. When I stepped up to the microphone to offer the welcome, my voice trembled slightly, but the intention was clear. We are here to welcome each and every one of you. This space is safe, and here you can be who you truly are. The first stories began to flow, and with each tale, I saw the transformation taking place. There were tears, laughter, and the palpable feeling that we were all in this journey together. A woman shared how her struggle with addiction had affected her life and her relationships. I heard her words resonate in many hearts around. It was as if each story was a thread that united everyone there, weaving a web of empathy and understanding. However, amidst the beauty of vulnerability, resistance still hovered in the air. A man stood up, interrupting the stream of stories. "This is not what the church should be. We need strength here, not weakness," he said with an intense look. The murmuring in the room grew, and the tension was palpable. The echo of his words brought to light a dilemma that I knew needed to be faced. What was it to be strong, and what did it mean to expose our weaknesses? I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. True strength is not the absence of pain, but the courage to face it. I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Here, we are creating a space where vulnerability is recognized as a form of strength. We need each other, and that is not a sign of weakness, but of humanity." The silence that followed was profound. I looked around, and some faces reflected a new understanding. It was a small step, but an important step. As the conversation dissipated, other participants began sharing their stories again. I realized that resistance had not disappeared, but there was space for dialogue. And that space was exactly what we needed to continue moving forward. With each new story, with each new account, the community became more cohesive. A young man who had faced bullying in school spoke about how the pain had shaped him, but also taught him about compassion. His words resonated with the audience, and I saw heads nodding in solidarity. As the day progressed, the festival began to become a true symbol of transformation. People began to connect in ways I could never have imagined. Various stories intertwined, forming unexpected bonds among the participants. A woman who had lost her mother found comfort in another who had also gone through the same pain. What was once a space of loneliness was transforming into a shelter of mutual support. When the afternoon came to an end, a feeling of accomplishment washed over me. I knew that what we had created there was just the beginning. The feeling that we were only at the start of this journey filled me with renewed hope. The festival was not just an event. It was a seed planted in fertile soil, an invitation for more voices to join and more stories to be told. As people began to disperse, I saw faces lit up with a glow that had not existed before. It was as if each person there had found a part of themselves that was missing. But the truth is that there was still much to be done. I realized that each story shared was a letter of emancipation, not only for the one speaking but also for those who were listening. And the idea that silence could be broken in such a powerful way made me reflect on how we could continue this wave of transformation. The desire to create more spaces, more events, began to flow through my mind like a mighty river. A group of volunteers was formed, and together we discussed how we could sustain this energy. What if we held regular meetings, not just once a month, I suggested, my heart racing. We can create smaller groups where people can come together to share their stories more intimately. The idea started to sprout, and in no time, we had a plan. To create a calendar of events that included workshops, lectures, and discussion circles. The enthusiasm was contagious. Each of us felt part of something bigger. Something that transcends individual pain and transforms into a collective movement of healing. A woman who had lost a child offered to lead a support group for bereaved parents. Another man, who had faced loneliness in his battle against depression, volunteered to share his experience in a lecture. The diversity of stories, united by a common purpose, was a force that could not be ignored. However, even with growing support, the shadow of doubt still lingered. Are we ready for this? I asked myself in moments of solitude. What if we couldn't maintain the warm and safe space we so desired? But, looking at the faces around me, I remembered that each one of them carried a story of overcoming, and that gave me courage. The fight was not just mine. We were all part of a web of love and empathy. As the days went by, the idea of a new meeting solidified. We started planning an event that would be a continuation of the festival, but with a different focus: Voices of Hope. The goal was not just to share the pain but also to celebrate the victories, no matter how small. I wanted people to feel that their progress was worthy of recognition, that every step taken towards healing was an achievement. The excitement grew with each meeting. That sense of community, of belonging, became a foundation on which we could build something even greater. And as we dreamed and planned, her image, the woman whose pains had taught me so much, remained in my heart. It was as if she was there, encouraging us to move forward, not to give up. I knew that through each voice, we were not only honoring her memory but also bringing to life a legacy of love and acceptance that could impact many others. Before you leave, do two things now: subscribe to the channel and activate the bell to receive upcoming messages. And share this video with someone who needs to hear this today. To continue, watch the next video. It's already in the cards and also in the description.